This is House Planning Help episode 390. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build or retrofit. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up, it's a solo session. If you want to build a new house, you're going to need a site. And that's what we're going to run through today. We'll be looking at what you should be considering in a plot of land. And I think that this links in nicely with something that we already have on the website. It's our free Finding Land course, and it goes into more depth on everything that we're talking about today. The goal being to explain the strategies that you use when you're finding land, also what you're up against, because it's not just you out there, how you value land and how you actively get underway. And don't lose hope. You'll get there in the end. So that on the website, houseplanninghelp.com/finding land course. Before we get started on this subject, it is a fun one. I do like looking for land, and it's the beginning of the journey, full of opportunity. Just a few things perhaps we should bear in mind, though. Starting with, there's no such thing as the perfect plot. If you keep on looking for it, it's going to take a very long time because it doesn't exist. So you've got to be aware that there'll be a compromise in here, and try not to discount opportunities, because you might even have this. I'm sure I've seen it a few times where people come back to the sites they were looking at the beginning because they just weren't ready. They didn't understand what was out there, and eventually it turns full circle. Also, don't do it the wrong way around. If you've never done this before and you think, well, I've got this great design for a house, I really like it. Now let's go and have a look for a site to put it on. That's not really how the design process works. Each site will have constraints and opportunities, and good design will embrace these and then respond to them. So going around with a house that you want to put somewhere, not really going to work. Or if you do want to do it, it's going to be incredibly hard. Prepare yourself that this is something that's tougher than when you buy a house. You might have been through that process and remember it and think, oh, it was so draining. This is even harder because there are so many things that you've got to bear in mind, and you've got to weigh it all up before you proceed. You're also up against other people, up against professionals who know how to do this and are eager to snap up the great sites as soon as possible. So that's one reason this is frequently referred to as the biggest challenge when building a house. It's finding the site in the first place. Generally, this is a lengthy process. Yes, sometimes it can happen quickly. Maybe you've been gifted the land, or you've been sitting on it. You might have been in a house and looking at your garden and thinking, one day I will do that. But brace yourself for a journey that could take months or even years. And this is my top tip. I've always loved this. You've got to be flexible, because that just allows you to make the most of the opportunities. And we'll probably return to be flexible, no doubt, a few times during this conversation. So some of those things that I've just mentioned, they're not that cheery, are we? So let's just end on a cheery one, which is, so long as you've got the funds, and I'll repeat that line because that is important. So long as you've got the funds, then people who are looking for land, they get there eventually. Let's get to our main section then of the podcast. It's in no particular order. I started to think, what is the logical way to go through this? But the challenge is they're all connected to each other, and you can't look at any one bit in isolation. So that's my caveat, no particular order. And this is not an exhaustive list of considerations. There are more, no doubt, that I haven't remembered. And I suppose we should also say, I'm thinking about the UK. It may be slightly different where you are. So we'll get underway with a few physical characteristics. Let's lead ourselves in on the fun stuff. Where do you want to be geographically? And this is such an interesting question. A few times when people have built houses, I've asked it as well, and they've come up with different things. Of course, it is going to be personal preference. And there are two extremes, really. You might have the people who they'll do anything. They'll go anywhere just so long as I can build. And then the other end of the spectrum, which is I want to be right here. Look, I'll put my finger on that point. And sadly, both of these extremes could end up with difficult situations. The first, you might actually build your house somewhere you don't want to be. I've seen it happen. So you're being carried by the wind. So you do want to have a bit more involvement about where you want to be. And the second, well, those people could well be still looking for that site, because if you restrict yourself too much, then it's very difficult, because you're looking at that one specific thing and there's nothing worse than actually an opportunity does come up. And let's say it goes under the surface, because this does happen, particularly when agents can work with builders and skip you, and then they get to not only get a bit of commission off the builder, but then when it comes back onto the market. So that is something that's very annoying when you're looking in a small area. So identify what's important to you. Think about the areas that you like, why you like them, and make your own list of criteria. Perhaps we've just mentioned that you like the community where you are already, or is this the time to move home? Where did you grow up? Was that what gives you that good feeling? Is there a part of the world that you've always loved? Maybe you've holidayed there and just thought, I am drawn in by this. Do you want to escape the city? Do you want to be in amongst it all more? Whatever it is it somewhere that makes you feel safe, alive, happy? You're going to live your best life here. And you're also going to be part of this community. It won't be you operating in isolation, well, unless you're out in the sticks somewhere, but you'll still be part of the neighborhood. So make sure they share your values. And here are some more things to look for, getting practical. Perhaps it's the schools. That so often drives property prices, doesn't it? The decent schools. Am I in the catchment area? And maybe you want to walk to various amenities, the shops, restaurants, a gym, the theatre. It just makes life so much easier. And is it safe to walk back at night? Think about medical facilities. Where are they in relation to where we're looking? Maybe you've got pets. You've got a dog that needs to be taken for a walk. Are you going to be doing the same walk all the time, or can you get to the local park? Where are you going to carry out your hobbies? Are there good routes for cycling that you can get out of your village, and you've got some great cycle routes, or football clubs or swimming centres? It's personal, isn't it? You've got to know what's the priority for you and what are the things that would be nice but not essential. And bear in mind as well the pain points. So maybe you've ticked all of those boxes, but what does that mean if you've got a site that's near a busy road? Can you put up with it? Or is there quite a lot of pollution there? Maybe it's a high-speed railway line. I've seen that once, a house that it was a little distance from the railway line, but it shook when the high-speed train went past. And I know my local station's like that as well, where you almost have to put your fingers in your ears every time a train is not stopping and it's just going through the station. What else could we add to our list? Flight paths. Yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it, to get away from planes, but where will they be low and the noise is going to be really consistent? Maybe not. Sometimes it can be really quiet for a while and then the wind changes direction and then you get the low planes. And that's one where you need to be visiting the site at different times of the day. Maybe there's a funny smell, and again, the wind could change direction to reveal the poultry farm down the road or the sewage works, or maybe not even that bad. It might be a brewery. Just knowing some of these things up front helps you. You don't want to discover it when constructing and thinking, I'm going to have to live with this now. What is the approach like to this site? What feeling does it give you as you come through? And what's funny about everything that I'm talking about in this session is I've seen examples firsthand. And one that I remember for this was where the owners were really keen to access their site from the other side. They knew full well that would be much better. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. So they had to come in through a slightly dilapidated neighbourhood with spare tyres on the front lawn, or probably the front lawn had been ripped out and was now a parking space, and people loitering on the corner. Then you got through the gates to this lovely house. Probably a slight exaggeration, but curb appeal does matter. It might be a different situation for you. Maybe you're more rural and you've got that view, and that's one of the drivers. You like this site because of the view. Just check if you think it's in the offing that this could become an extension of the neighborhood, then that view's not going to last for long. And one thing I have seen before is where people have bordered protected areas, a national park, for example, and that's clever thinking because it's pretty safe then in that respect. How much land do you need? Do you need an acre to build your house? Do you need half an acre, quarter of an acre, tenth of an acre? What's interesting is even on that last site, tenth of an acre, you could still get a fairly decent size house. It would obviously be quite cramped and it would depend what the shape is. But the point being, you don't need loads of land. Maybe you need to consider, what is it that I want on this? And again, factor in all the costs. Do you want a driveway and the house set back from the road? Do you want parking space, or is it a garage, a workshop? Do you love your gardening? Is there space for that, or a kid's play area? Maybe you want to keep a horse. Well, that might be a good argument for having more land. Or do you want to rewild an area and protect it yourself and enjoy it as it changes over the years? So can the site support all the things that you want to do? Don't look at it that bigger sites are better, because that's not the way. Particularly if you're someone new, you've never lived in a big house before, you just like the idea, you've come into money and you're going to have a big house and a big garden. And then you get a bit of a shock because either you've got to hire someone to keep everything in shape, or you're spending money here, there, and your time as well. Land needs managing, houses need to be maintained. Remember that. And if you're struggling to work out how much space you need or you think you need, I always bring up Sarah Suzanka, someone I chatted to in the early days, architect and author of The Not So Big House and many others along those lines, not so big. Her idea was use all the space every day. So imagine yourself, I'm here now. What would it mean that I use all the space in the house, and preferably all the space in the garden too? That's maybe less likely, but it works well for the house, because then when you start putting in a billiards room and thinking, will I use this every day? I'm not sure. Let's recap. So be clear about your needs. What is nice to have? So needs and nice to have, they're two different things. What can you live without? Could be handy to make a list, just identifying those different columns there. The needs, the nice to have, and what could you actually do without? Because that's probably going to help you when you come to make the final decision. While we're looking at the site, what is the orientation? Really important. We like the idea of a low energy home. Well, a low energy home, if you want the free heating, you need some sunshine. So we need to know, how does the sun interact with the plot? Are we going to get our solar gains? You have a compass app, don't you, on the phone, so you can have a look. Is it south facing if we're in the northern hemisphere? Good. Yeah. How's the sun moving round? Oh, lovely. And what that means is you get all sorts of other benefits. If you want to put solar PV on, when you think about shading, you can shade by passive means with an overhang, and that will do the work. It just works better on the south elevation. I'm not saying don't consider plots in other orientations. You just have to think, if you've got no access to the sun, and this does happen on occasion, all that free heat you're missing out on. I think the average person on the street has no sense that that's a real thing. You're missing out. You're immediately putting your energy bills up. Even if you're in a very efficient home, if you haven't got access to the sun, it's going to be more expensive to heat. And if you want to track the sun's movements, there are great apps such as Sunseeker. I think there are lots of them, though, that you could choose between that just show you the path wherever you are in the world. And that is a really good thing to consider. What is around your site? Is there anything you can't control? Perhaps some massive trees that are not on your land that tower over you, or a tall building, something that's stopping you. You need to have a look there. And you sometimes find this when people are using an existing dwelling that's maybe in a very poor state and is going to come down, that they might live in these properties for a while just to get a feel for the sun and the seasons and make the best choices in the design process. I tried not to put this at the beginning, but we do need to bring it up now. Money. Yeah, this is the reality check. It's so often that our dreams don't quite match up to our funds. And at some point, we have to have that reality check. We have to come back down to earth. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. It's a sliding scale, really. We can all get caught out by how expensive things are. Just take in the whole picture. That's what you've got to remind yourself. It's not just the plot of land and you look at that and you look at your bank account and think, I've got enough money there. It's everything else. This is only a piece of the puzzle. You've got to hire professionals, buy the materials, do the groundworks, get the superstructure up, pay for all those finishes which are so expensive, surveys, legal fees, contingency budgets. You don't want to be one of the people who run out of money. This is almost the worst thing that can happen because it has lots of knock-on effects. It makes you stressed. Perhaps your health will suffer as a consequence of that, or your marriage. This is a fun process. We don't want to run out of money. So let's run the numbers. And this is the way that we do it. We need to understand what the value is of what we're going to do here. Look at that end product and then work backwards. And it is actually a little bit easier than you might imagine. Maybe not for some of those build costs and things, because you might have to keep adjusting those and juggling those. But the end value, at least, each neighborhood has a ceiling value. You might not think it does, but if you look along a street, maybe it might vary very slightly. If, that one's got a slightly bigger garden, or that one's got more accommodation, 500,000 for that, 520 for this, 480, 4 million. It just doesn't happen. The people with 4 million go down the road and build somewhere else. So use online searches. They often give you a facility, something like Rightmove, to look at what properties sold for in that given street. That will give you your ceiling value. And then you can think about, what does the land support? What is the floor area of these properties? Quite often people talk in bedrooms. That drives me mad because it's the floor area and how you tinker it to your own needs. You could have 10 bedrooms in there that would be absolutely tiny. However, we don't want that. It's the floor area and how we configure it that matters. And what types of home are being built around here? Does it look like we're going to get consent for what we want to do? And the streetscape will give you an idea of that as well. Let's come back to this equation then to help you value the land. Land cost plus build cost plus a profit of 20 to 30% has to equal or be less than the value of the finished property. And again, you don't want to stray into this, all of that adding up to more. And it should have a profit. That is something that you could delve into if you think you're going to be in this house for a long time. A developer won't be able to do that. They'll need to sell and move on. You can tweak that a little bit. There should be a profit as well. It's a lot of work building a house, so you deserve a profit at the end of it. And then, you've got to juggle the factors. Let's say it once more. Land cost plus build cost plus 20 to 30% profit is less than the finished value of the property. And you've got inflation and things that hopefully will help you, but don't rely on that. And what I love, again, bringing up an example from the past, is when I've seen architects design their own homes and they've gone through the process, they've designed it with a certain floor area, they put a lot of work in, and they get to the end and realize, I can't afford this. So what do? Go back to the beginning of the process, make the place smaller. That's the only real grasp that you have on the cost, is making things smaller, perhaps simplifying it as well. As homeowners, we're not quite so lucky, are we? We've got to hire the design professionals, but don't think, just soldier on. I've got this far in the process. I'm going to build this property. Don't get out of pocket and keep that contingency in place. Make it a healthy contingency. And as we talked about things like the build costs, you can be revising this as you get more detail and get your quotes and fill in some of it. And then when you're through the process as well, if you've given yourself a bucket of money of this is what this is going to cost, stick within that or the budget is going to slide. Let's talk about planning permission, another absolute essential. It's not a plot unless it's got planning permission. If you're elsewhere in the world, no doubt you'll have your rules, your zoning. You just need to understand land use designation. So your local authority here in the UK will not want you building all over the place. In fact, I've been to the west coast of Ireland before, and it's fascinating. I think their planning system, although these days will maybe follow what a lot of us do, back in the day, you could just build anywhere. And you see that, you just think, this is weird. I turn a corner and there's a house over there and there's one down that street. Oh, there's a beautiful place, but there's another house. And so you understand what the planning system is trying to do. That's not very efficient, is it? To just build all over the place, and you've got to have roads all over the place. You're not near to any amenities, so you'll be driving backwards and forwards. And that's why these exist. So they're trying to get all the development in areas that they think, well, this would be a good area to develop. So you need to understand what your local planning authority has laid out. I wouldn't recommend anyone buying a site without planning permission, even if maybe sometimes you want to get planning permission on a garden site and you don't own the garden. You still can do things legally, get options, but you don't want to be buying that land until you know 100% that you can build your house on it. Again, that's just scary stuff when you move into those moments that you know something very bad has happened. So if you buy a site with planning permission on it, you've got drawings attached if it's detailed planning permission, and you may think, well, I don't want to build this. That was the whole fun. I get to build my own house. Normally, you can swap things around, give or take. There'll be certain parameters that you have to stick with. You can't just say, oh, I tell you what, can we double the size of this house? So it can be done, and drawings can be swapped over. Just check with planning permission whenever you're buying something with planning permission on that it's still got time before it expires, because you'll want to make the changes and you don't want to have that right up against the deadline because planning departments are overworked as it is. What type of land is available? You've got greenfield sites, which are agricultural, and you stand a very slim chance of building on these. It's not even worth looking. You've got brownfield sites. Bit more of a possibility here. It's had something on before, yeah, perhaps. Infill sites. When we come to look at the settlement boundaries that the planning departments put together on the big local plan, that is much more of an opportunity. I suppose the question you have to ask is, why has it not been snapped up already? You've got replacement dwellings, another popular route, particularly if something is just looking in such a sorry state that you'd have to pretty much rebuild it to make it habitable again. The gardens that we've talked about, sometimes a house will have a big garden. This will all be within a settlement boundary, and that garden can be separated. It doesn't actually affect the value of the house too much. You might think it would suddenly drop down, but if it's done carefully, and maybe there is a smaller garden with the existing house and now you have the plot to the side. But sometimes you see this happen. Local to me, there was one where a builder bought the property, divided it into two, and then didn't get planning permission. I watched this site, I thought, what's going to happen here? And I watched, and one day it was joined back together again, put on the market, and it was a house with a garden. And the builder would have known the risks and perhaps assessed that even if it goes wrong, I'll still get my money back. That is a professional doing it. That's why we pay for sites with planning permission, to avoid the perils, the possible losses as well if you'd paid over the odds to begin with. Just before we finish up on planning permission, it does go deep on this one. I'm just skimming the surface here. Other things to be aware of. You've got conservation areas that have a strict code. Areas of outstanding natural beauty, no chance. We've featured a couple of podcasts where people have built in open countryside. Again, I would not suggest this. Unless your pockets are deep, you're looking for a challenge, just got nothing else to do, you want to employ lots of consultants. That exception clause within the National Planning Policy Framework for outstanding projects that are going to enhance the area. Another thing you can do to get more in tune with the planning system, every local authority will have a planning section of their website, which will show you the submissions, who is awaiting to hear whether they're going to get the green light or not. You can have a look, you can follow these, you can check into details, and it's just going to give you a sense of what gets approved and what does not. If you need assistance as well, I mentioned consultants a few moments ago. Remember, you can get support from a planning consultant. And I've found a lot of architects and designers, they're very well versed in planning. Not all of them, but a lot of them, I suppose, where it's done in-house, they have to know the system. So that could also be an avenue of support. Topography next. What is the lay of the land? In general, flat sites are much easier to deal with. I always think of Mark Brinkley, the author of the House Builder's Bible, because he has his little slope law that he developed himself and tries to put a cost on every increment, every 5 degrees you add to the slope. It's going to cost you more. And that's the fundamental message. The steeper the slope, the more the cost. Just because you've got everything to deal with below ground, foundations, retaining walls, dealing with moisture, it all adds extra cost and you've got to have it investigated. It's worth mentioning that some people like a slope if they're happy with that cost. They like it because it creates the upside down house quite nicely. So it's possible you might drive in the level where you've got the living space on the upper floor, and then you'll go down to the bedrooms. The bedrooms are cooler, and it's just, if you've got a nice view, such a good thing to do. I love an upside down house. What are you going to do with all the spoil, though, when you're digging out your ground? Where is it going to go? Can you spread it out on the site or have a plan for it? Or is it going to have to be removed? Another advantage of plots with challenges is sometimes they reduce the competition. So maybe people don't like that slope. And if you are an expert in any of the plots with challenges, then maybe that's the one for you. But you really have got to know your stuff and tread carefully. And when we're looking at ground, what is the ground? What's it made of? Is it clay? Is it chalk, rock, sand, gravel? They all have their own characteristics. And this impacts on the foundation choice, drainage. What's the groundwater like? Is it a high water table for that area? And hiring local professionals is often the way you get local knowledge as well. This one reminds me of Beth Williams, structural engineer. We were talking about her local patch around Bristol and Bath, where they had a lot of coal mining. So that was something, historic landslip in the area. You have to be very careful what you buy. And I think, I don't know whether it was influenced by that, but she was a real advocate for a proper geotechnical survey where you get a geotechnical engineer digging boreholes, trial pits, and looking at the findings, sending samples off for lab testing and producing a report, finding out the chemicals in the ground. And I think her take on it was that that could even save you money on the foundation design. So definitely one that's worth bearing in mind. At the very least, you're going to pay for surveys, check historical data, and it's always worth just chatting to people who live in the area if this is not the area that you're familiar with. Where does it flood, for example? I find it fascinating as well. The longer you live in an area, the more you see, say, for example, surface water flooding. I've seen that. And then we had this one freak downpour, and a flood zone I'd never seen before just popped up in front of one of these houses. And the owners of these houses were, what is happening here? Where did all this water come from? The drains were full up at capacity, and then suddenly the water decides to go in a different direction. So you've got to assess this, and water damage is such a horrible one to deal with, whether it's coming through your roof or up through the ground or from floods or anything like that. Don't buy a site that says, oh, don't worry, it only floods every 20 years or every 50 years, because this is living dangerously, particularly in this era where that 50 years, oh, actually, let's recalculate it's every 20 years or every 5 years, or look, it's happening right now. Another question you need to be able to answer is what's been on this site previously? What was the route that this got to market? And checking out for things like contamination. You don't want to discover that asbestos has been buried in the ground casually or anything like that. Or a completely different slant. What about you've got protected wildlife or habitats on your plot? Great crested newts. It's possible. Bats are a common one as well. And this doesn't necessarily stop you in your tracks. Again, it's a time thing. It will probably take a bit of time to sort out and to make sure that the different species are protected or relocated or whatever it might be. Look to trees. Different species will tell you different things about the ground. In some areas, there might even be a tree preservation order, so something that can't be removed through the planning system. They want to keep that there. And maybe trees have been removed to make this look more like a plot. That's another thing that can happen. So watch out for the ground that suddenly trees have gone. It's absolutely waterlogged or heave is going on. Things like that that don't always work well. You've got to be careful with your foundations and the design of that. before we move on, it's just reminded me of something else where I often watch sites and you can see it coming. I've watched it enough now. And this one, it's a little bugbear of mine, I'll admit, where you see people moving into wooded areas. And I've come to the conclusion that living in a wood, it's not a good idea. Inevitably, people start cutting the trees down. But this particular site had some lovely trees there and this very small bungalow. And what's happened is, over the course of probably a few years, gradually a tree's gone on that side and then one on the other. And I was just waiting. Someone's going to put in for planning permission any moment, and another one. And it had 2 gates. That was the first thing that they did when they arrived there, was they put 2 gates. And of course, it's cropped up, but we'll follow that one with interest. What's underneath the site? Are there sewers, electrical cables, all of these sorts of things? You've got to do your research to find out. And some of these sort of fit in when you're looking at the legal side. We'll come on to that in a bigger way in a minute. But access, can you actually get to the site? Is it all legal? It's quite difficult to know straight off. You hope that is the case with everything that you look at. I remember Denby Dale was a situation where they had a ransom strip. Small piece of land owned by somebody, and you can't go across that until you've got a legal right that is negotiated. And of course, what does that come down to? Money. And again, this is another nasty thing, really, that it's a way to catch people out and make a fast buck by owning a very small piece of land. So it does happen. Maybe it's someone else who already has access, or a footpath, public footpath that goes across your land somehow. You just need to be aware of it. You can move these things sometimes, not always. I remember a famous person in our area who tried to move the footpath. It didn't work that time. I don't understand what makes the difference, but you can try. Is your access onto a public highway? Because again, that's a little bit easier. Or are you trying to create a new access and you're going to need a visibility splay? So this is a certain amount of space that's going to make it all safe. And if you don't have that space, it all becomes too tight. Then you won't be granted that access, and then you have the same problem all over again. Is that access onto a private road, which it can still work, but you've got to make sure you're allowed to use that private road. How is it going to be maintained? Is there some shared process that you're all going to resurface it after a certain amount of time, or when it comes into a certain state? What is the access going to be like for lorries bringing all of your supplies to site? So yeah, it's not just access for you. What about, and those white van man dropping off the parcels and driving at 100 miles an hour? Can they get in and out okay? So this rolls into the legal stuff, which we'll come back to, just being aware of all sorts of things, whether it's the rights of way, the restrictive covenants, anything that you are obliged to do or that could limit your building options. Just want to know about it before you buy the land. Another consideration, utilities and services. Can you get services to your site? Power, water, drainage. If you've got an existing dwelling that you're going to demolish and rebuild, one benefit normally is that you've got the services on site to begin with. So you're going to save some money there, save yourself a bit of organisation as well. If you haven't, then it's going to cost. Every metre you need to get it sorted out is a bit of extra cost. There might be other costs. Maybe they'll need to close roads and do other organisational things to make it happen. Internet access as well is a consideration. Sometimes it's a driver and people will look, well, I'll move to the cheap area, but the area that's very well connected so that I can do my job online. So that's something else to think about. And then there are the other locations that are so remote that they've got to come up with some cunning way of getting their internet signal, paying perhaps quite a lot of money to have it beamed to them. So that's services and utilities. And we're just going to come back to that legal side. I'm no expert here, so we're going to fly through this. I just make it as a warning, really, that you need to understand the legal bits and pieces, because there are things like covenants which can be put on the title of a piece of land, and then you will have to follow whatever that covenant is. It might be connected to privacy, or sometimes you come across an uplift clause that may mean that if it was, say, an agricultural piece of land that was sold on, if now you're going to put a house on it, well, they're going to get a slice of the pie. So there are things like rights of way that we've talked about, also easements. Consult someone who knows what they're talking about. You need to get a solicitor who does this day in, day out. That would be my tip here, because you need that peace of mind. It's the end of the process here. You need to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. A good solicitor will be thorough, and so don't get upset when they are. They're just trying to do their job and represent you as best they can. Maybe you'll come across a challenge. It might not be the end of the road if a historic covenant comes up and you need to take out some insurance in case a long lost ancestor creeps out of the woodwork to claim their reward. But yeah, a good solicitor is worth their weight in gold. Let's round things off for today then. Couple more bits of advice. It's very easy to find a rubbish plot, plenty that people don't want, and that's sometimes a warning sign. If you see a site that's been on the market for a long time, it'll have a challenge of some description. Also, if you're buying at auction, it may be a similar thing. Do you get a good feeling about the site you're looking at? Just think, wow, this is it. It feels right. Or is it the reverse, that I'm sure there's something I'm not getting about looking at this site? So know when to pull away if you're getting that feeling. If it's too good to be true, maybe this price is just too tempting, then it can be. As I've mentioned a couple of times in the podcast, this is an area that people make money. There are also a few sharks or hidden traps. And then finally, there's more on our website to explore the different ways that you can find land, but I thought I'd mention some of them. You've got the right to build register, which is a good starting point. Just make sure you're on that for your local area, and then maybe an opportunity will come out from that. You've got self and custom build sites. Gravenhill in the UK is the most famous one, where custom plots are just available to buy. Oh my goodness. That's, in fact, you wouldn't listen to this podcast, would you? If you go and buy one of those, you don't need to listen to anything I've said because it's all arranged and sorted for you. You've got dedicated websites, Plot Finder, Plot Search, where you pay, and then you can have a look at the opportunities on there. You can develop a relationship with an estate agent, because not all of them are acting in your interest. They may prefer to deal with builders and get the double sell, the sell to the builder and then the sell when it comes back to you as a house. Auctions, yeah, that's another place to look. Detective work. Do you remember Adrian Reith? I will never forget that, where he had his eye on these garages, and each year he'd send a letter. I think it was one of the universities that owned it, saying, well, do you want to sell this to me? And eventually they did, after 10 years or whatever it might be. You've got land agents, perhaps not as useful for small sites because there'll be some fee or percentage attached. And normally that means it just has to be a bigger site, but certainly worth exploring. And I'll finish on something I remember from my chat with David Snell, who was lovely to chat with and we interviewed a few times. But he was saying his way of doing it, you get everyone warmed up first. So use that analogy of you're going fishing. Well, you don't just stick your fishing rod, put the hook down, away you go. You throw some bait out to make the fish come into your area to begin with. So he would speak to as many different people as possible. I'm going away for a couple of weeks, but when I come back, I'll be looking for a site, and let architects, builders, estate agents, solicitors prep them up, get them ready, friends. Get to social media, tell people. It is a game of just trying all the avenues, and then hopefully you will be lucky. So we've added various resources and mentions into the show notes today. So if you want to reflect on any of that, I know it's a lot of me talking. I hope it was useful. It's difficult when you start on one of these and you get carried away and excited and you recall things from the past. So I hope it hasn't been boring either. But houseplanninghelp.com/390 has a summary of the information, and we've got more inside the hub too, which is our membership community. And I would love to hear from you. Well, two sets of people. If you have just acquired a site recently, then tell me, how did you do it? How was the journey? Is it getting any easier? Or if you're someone who's looking, and maybe we can get a load of people together, do a boot camp, that would be great as well, because then you'll get inspired when other people are going and putting the time in, because that is so much of this is about spending the time and going and visiting. A lot of it you can go no in front of a screen, but there does come a point when you've got to get out from behind the screen and start looking, and it might be a no when you arrive on site, but you've got to do the legwork. So my call to action is to check out the Hub, our membership community, dive into the Finding Land course. There's more in there, but lots more besides. We've got courses on all the various different aspects of building a great low energy home. We've got Ask the Expert. We've got the forum where you can mingle with others. You can chat to me during office hour. We also filmed through a number of different projects, trying to bring you all the lessons and the decisions that were being made. So we do this for you. Come and find out more. houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's it for today. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Well done. Give yourself a badge. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.